why should I wear it? You know, I don't know. I think a lot of, and then I know that they're following the science, but it gets confusing and people get tired of constantly having to, they finally think they know what they're supposed to do and then they get told they don't have to do it that way. Either, having to, okay, so I have to quarantine for 5 days, but now I only have to, I had to quarantine for 10 days, but now I only have to isolate for 5 days if I've been vaccinated and I'm asymptomatic, and then I wear a mask. You know, it's very confusing for people. So then it makes it even harder for them to trust, because it takes them a long time to believe what you're saying, and then you change what you're saying. So, yeah. And then Facebook and menace preachers. In my own house, I have so a mandate to live in my house for my older children was that they be vaccinated. And my own little mandate, and their jobs were requiring vaccination. So, but I have one that's refused to get boosted because he just doesn't believe that it's necessary. Or why is it necessary? Why is it necessary?
Okay. One of your children. Okay. Yeah. So let me reiterate what you said and ask another question. So people listen different things from different sources that obviously they come from different party lines. They're from different political backgrounds, and people hear different messages. Like sometimes these messages contradicts each other. So who do you think that your patients listen most to and follow the most?
Their peers and their religious leaders. I think we are not, we're not, especially if they've been coming to us. Generally, when they're coming to us, they trust us. And I kind of say that to people as well as like, you've come to us for these other problems. Either this is your first visit or a follow-up visit. You've been coming to us, or even since a child, they've been coming to us, and now they're an adult with their own children. So you trust us enough with a certain level of your care. So do you think that we would intentionally advise you to do something that we felt was going to hurt you? Your health and your children's health are our priority. We work in a free clinic. You come to us because you trust us. And so, that's one level of trying to get them to try to identify maybe where their hesitancy might come from. But I would definitely say their peers and their religious leaders would be kind of top. Not that they don't listen to us, and we have had people make decisions against families' choices who said maybe don't get the vaccine, and we've brought it up a couple times, and we encourage them. And there's also was this whole thing. It was interesting because the whole racial issue about because Black people would have fewer access to vaccines depending on where they lived, and there was an equity issue, and it's very, very true. Definitely an equity issue on where vaccines were distributed and the information that was given to people, and how do you sign up? And we talked about that briefly already, that yes, even though people have cell phones and use internet, the signing up process wasn't always straightforward, and finding a location, and then you find it, you click on it and it's already gone, just trying to get places for vaccines. Or we found people would go and the vaccine would be, quote, free, but they had to pay for the administration of the vaccine. And so we have friends who were paying who went to get their vaccine, the vaccine was free, quote, but they had to pay $45 per injection to have it administered. Mm-hmm. And that's a real deterrent. That shouldn't be that way. So anyway, so I would say, but we were telling people, it used to be, or one of the conversations I would have with some of my clients who were people of color is like, think about it this way though, who's getting the vaccine most now? If it was because they were, think about Tuskegee and other mm-hmm. medications and other issues where people of color have been not only at a disadvantage, but abused, in terms of medical care and science. And mm-hmm. so, I was saying, look at this. This is weird. Now think about it this way, in that the people who are getting the vaccine are white people. Okay. Mm-hmm. The people who it's not that they're preventing you from keeping and if you were looking at it as intentional abuse or risk to you as a person of color, mm-hmm. then you need to pay attention to who's jumping on the boat and mm-hmm. who they are not letting on the boat. So mm-hmm. what is safer for you? To refuse a vaccine that everybody else who is maybe in a system that is against you mm-hmm. is getting. It's a backward. So with the getting this is better for you than not getting it if you're looking at it as a racial equity thing. So we had some really good conversations around that with several of my clients, is trying to understand the piece that racial equity and medical history with people of color played.
Mm-hmm. And these were hesitant colleagues?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Patients, yeah.
Okay. And so let's go back to what you mentioned about the immigrants and their accessibility. What are the main problems that you faced for those populations in terms of accessibility?
Partly language, depending mm-hmm. on where they were coming from. Depending on where they were going, you had to show ID. Mm-hmm. You may not have to prove, you didn't have to prove citizenship or anything, but you had to have some kind of ID, and and they may not have. Our clinic is like I said, we are a free clinic, and we're not federally funded as well. We don't get federal funds, so we don't. Mm-hmm. People are not required to show ID. Mm-hmm. But other places where you were trying to register for the vaccine, depending on where it was and how it was being done, people mm-hmm. had to show identification. And they were, nervous about either not having it, or maybe the ID that they had was expired, or, mm-hmm. So I think, so there was some fear some hesitancy because they weren't sure what the outcome might be for them if they were to kind of come out, for their vaccine.
And what was the solution for that problem? I mean,
we helped them find places that would reassure them that ID wasn't an issue, mm-hmm. that the point was getting a vaccine. The point was not if you were legal or illegal. And then helping them get printed information, or on like a Google chat or a Google Translate, or be with a translator that could help them understand the pros and cons of the vaccine.
You mentioned something really interesting about the immigrant population, that one of their sources of the hesitancy is not only that the vaccine is free or not, even if it's free, for the side effects and what comes after it, that they don't have any resources, so they are afraid that. Did I hear it right?
Yeah. So if there was a side effect, then what do they do? Where do they go? How do they? Because they already struggle getting care for whatever their issue is, and then if they are intentionally doing something that could cause them to have a reaction or a problem, then what do they do?
Yeah, so that's why they prefer, even if it's free, even if there's no like barrier to get the vaccine.